Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Childcare Bridge Podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your childcare center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Childcare Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of the Childcare Bridge. Today is a continuation as we're talking through all of the trends that are going to make up 2025 and beyond. And we started last week talking about this framework that, if you're new today, is called MAST. Marketing, accounting, sales, team/talent, and then systems and strategy. And I love to use acronyms so that you can always kind of easily remember what are the areas that you need to be focused on, what are the areas that you should be spending your time in. And the reason that we always start with marketing, and I'm going to continue to harp on this until I actually start to see childcare center owners taking action. Because as much as I harp on certain things, I'll say, here's the proven process. Here is literally the keys to the kingdom. Here is the exact fortune map, as we call it. A fortune map is basically, think of it as a treasure hunt that literally gives you step by step by step, and then it leads you to that pot of gold. And that pot of gold could mean one of many things. It could mean more locations. It could mean ridiculous amounts of profit in this industry. I'd say, well, Michael, no one makes any money in this industry. I can promise you that the centers that heed our advice are making plenty of profit. But you need to be taking the right actions. You need to be taking the actions that are actually moving the needle, not things that are kind of noise. And I've been there. I've done that. I find myself some days, not most, and if I find myself in that routine, I'll change it up like that, whether that means reading a book, going for a walk, exercising, grabbing a meal, just something to change up my energy if I find myself doing kind of busy work or the doom scrolling, as I like to call it, where you're lying in bed and you're scrolling through Instagram and Facebook and looking at things, and all of a sudden it's an hour that went by. There are certain strategies and tactics that are going to ensure that you absolutely dominate this year. And not only dominate this year, but ensure that your center stands the test of time. I like to look at it to where your center is on an island, and you literally have this gigantic moat around it. To where your center is and you've got this moat because you've put all of these different things in place to where no other centers can touch you. They can try, but your defenses, your strategies and systems, like all of this stuff is all working together to where no one is ever going to get past you. You're going to be just operating at a league of your own. So that is how the MAST framework, and that S at the end is hard to say. I usually say MAST and then I'll add the extra S at the end. But we always start with marketing. And the reason that we're always going to start with marketing is that it literally drives everything across your entire organization. And this is the one that I keep harping on, and then I look at what centers are actually doing. They'll come to me and say, Michael, we've got 5 locations, we're at 40% capacity, we're leaving $300,000 a month on the table, we've got all this extra space in after school, we only had summer camp at 10% full last year, like what do we need to do? I'll say, great, we're gonna really throw some weight on the marketing side. And then a couple weeks go by and I'll look and I'll see, well, they retooled their summer camp in terms of the activities. And I'll look over here and they added some playground equipment. And then I'll look over here and maybe they changed a few things up at some of the classrooms. And it's not that those are bad things, but it's not the right thing at the right time. What happens when you take my advice and you rapidly increase your tuition over the next 12 months, especially for all new enrollments, to where now some families are, yeah, maybe you're pricing us out of the market. Okay, great. You've got plenty of other families right around the corner that will pay for it. You do not stop marketing. 7% is the minimum. My recommendation is 10 to 12. Some of the centers were at 15%. New centers are a completely different story. Almost everything needs to be going towards marketing. You're opening up a new location. How are they magically going to find out about you? It's not just going to happen. So you need to be throwing your weight in marketing by way of time, energy, and money. Don't go start a $25,000 a month lease, hire 10 people, $100,000 in equipment and curriculum and playgrounds and cameras and all that crazy stuff, and then open with 5 enrollments. That is why you're getting crushed. You're not thinking through the right order of things, the right order. So that was my soapbox to start our episode. And if you like, oh my God, you're really giving me some tough love. I am giving you tough love because I need you to win. I need you to win. I want it for you, your family, the community, your staff, the family of your staff, the vendors. I want it for you and then everyone else. And if you don't make some swift changes in 2025, you are going to be in for a very rude awakening, because the stuff that I'm seeing that I've been talking about in previous episodes, it's getting a lot harder in this industry to generate new enrollments. As I said last week, private equity is slowly and quietly buying up centers left and right. And that center down the street that you thought was owned by a former teacher, that they've had it for 30 years, you didn't even realize that 2 years ago they got bought out by private equity and they're throwing 20% in marketing, and they've lowered their tuition for the short term to be able to blast up their enrollment numbers, and then they're going to jack it back up, and it's getting crazy. But the good news is you're here and you're action takers. So if I continue on this trends of the MAST framework, we talked last week about a couple of the marketing trends. I wanted to give you a few more marketing trends before next week we then start to talk about accounting. What are some of the financial and accounting trends and things that you need to be working on this year that you need to be aware of? I could give you 100 trends that I'm seeing just on marketing, but I don't want to massively overwhelm you. So for today, I want to talk about you doing some things that I would label are not scalable. Not scalable. So this means things like putting together $1 million tour for every family that comes in and having that tour be hyper customized. Instead of having just a one-size-fits-all tour, what if you had an intake survey that you either got via email, through text, over the phone, and you had a whole slew of different variations of your tour so that you are literally answering objections and hitting on the pain points that the parent had conveyed to you. Most centers have a one-size-fits-all tour. Here are the classrooms, here's how we have the security so that no one is going to get in, here's our little cafeteria, or here's where the food prep, here's where your son or daughter is going to store their stuff, you can meet one of the teachers, here's our playground equipment, and then at the end they talk and, hey, what questions do you have? Anything getting in the way? And some centers go in for the close. A lot of them, for some reason, do not. But that's almost every tour that I've ever seen. I've been on hundreds and hundreds of tours, maybe even thousands at this point. Most of them undercover, so that they don't know who I am. I'll just say I'm a dad, and which I am. But I love to go in to our centers that we work with and actually audit their tours without them knowing I'm doing it. They might know I'm in town, but they're not going to give their directors a heads up because they want honest feedback. The usual reason that I go in and audit tours is that if I see terrible data, which when we get to the systems piece, everything is going to be driven by data. If I see 10 tours that came through and only 1 closed, that's some pretty poor data. You should be at minimum closing 3, ideally closing 5 or 6 of every 10 tours. The average center closes about 54% of their tours. So every other tour turns into an enrollment. So usually I can spot something. It's not, you can't say, oh, it's the leads. Well, why did they come in and take a tour? They're not just coming in and taking time out of their day to take a tour for no reason. It's the tour. There's something off with the tour or the investment, or there's a disconnect somewhere. So if you look at these things of doing some marketing that doesn't scale, I always like to start with the tour. And again, that can be the little things of having their little sign outside the front, having a dedicated parking space for that particular family, doing a little bit of research about that family, maybe even having a little welcome gift that's custom for that family. Maybe you go as far as you can even have one of those Cricut machines at each of your centers and they make a little mug that has the family name on them. Doing things that don't necessarily scale, but they're going to put you in a different league than everyone else. And then having that tour, you're going to have a framework for the tour, but you're going to say things like, I know that these 3 things are most important, so I'm going to show you the other things quickly, but we're going to focus on 1, 2, 3 because that's what you told me was most important to you. You're doing things, you're coaching the team, you're executing at a different level that other centers are not willing to do. Hugely important this year, and it's one of those trends that just isn't talked about because everyone is more concerned with how can we automate, how can we use AI. I love AI, I use it all day, every day. But I also want to look at, as more and more centers start using AI, what can I continue to do to be light years ahead of them or do things that they are not willing to do from a marketing standpoint. The second trend is actually having your own Facebook group, school group, it's SKOOL, actually having some kind of closed-knit community that is not open, that is you simply providing advice, community, information. It's not all about your center, but rather you starting to take over and owning some of the particular media assets. So let's say that you are in the Orlando, Florida area, as you know, one of my favorite cities in the world, and you're looking to continue to grow your footprint. So what if you had a closed group that you owned and you moderated that was just providing information to parents? Maybe it's called Orlando Parents. Are there other groups like this? Yes, but they're not doing it as I'm teaching you. They're typically started by a mom that just wanted to, or dad that wanted to just do something in their free time. But what if you stealthily had one of these groups and you were moderating it and then you were able to kind of control that asset, and then every now and then, maybe a couple of times a month, you're able to push your center and offer XYZ. But it's going back to the other point of doing things that are not necessarily scalable or that everyone else is doing. So what if in that group you said we'd love to host 10 families after school and we've got a yoga instructor coming in. And then on Friday of that same week or the week after, you're going to bring in a bunch of chessboards and you want to have a spot for these families. And you start to make your center a little bit more of a go-to destination, because what's happening is that brand element is becoming so much more powerful than anything else. So much more powerful. And I want families and people in the community to start to associate childcare, daycare, after-school care, summer camp with your brand. And they do that by hearing more about you, seeing your brand more front and center. They do that by coming into your location. And if you're doing things that are a little bit outside of the norm, why couldn't you offer some fun after-school activities? Even if you didn't have after-school care, why couldn't you once a week have a particular activity and it's completely free of charge? Well, Michael, how are we going to make money? This is a marketing and a branding play. You limit it, then you build up a little bit of demand, and it's all pumping through wherever you are hosting that group. Now, I like a platform also called School. That's more of a education platform where you're putting out some training content. But what if you also were posting content about how to be a better parent, a better mom, a better dad, how to care for you're posting educational content, and on that group, that platform, there's also the community aspect. And there's a couple of those different types of communities. You can look at a variety of different ones and see which one makes the most sense for you. The most common is Facebook groups, but those are more conversational. But if you are ever able to get to the place where you're putting out content like I'm doing here and becoming more of the educator to families, that's game over. Like, you're not only a center, you've got some of these cool activities that you're doing at your center to help the community and raise awareness and grow your brand. You're also owning a particular asset or group in your area that helps just drive conversations in tandem with you putting out content to help parents and kids. You are going to be considered the go-to person, the go-to business, the go-to authority. You become the preferred local childcare center in your area. Like, nobody else would want to use you. But it's starting to do things that do not necessarily scale. I'm not looking for you to go and automate all of your marketing, but in 2025, I see this aspect of marketing by way of community more important than it ever has been. I also see this brand element more important than it ever. So if I look back at last week and then I pile on this week, last week we talked about organic social content, for example. So in last week's episode, we talked about organic social content, so the need to be posting a lot more content across social media. We talked about how you can leverage AI to accelerate your efforts. We talked about brand last week, and I re-talked about brand this week, in addition with doing things that do not scale. Doing things that do not scale. In terms of like what else is out there, it's a lot of the things that have been working over the years. It doesn't mean that every year there's all these new trends that you need to jump in on. It's hitting the singles with the things that are tried and true. For example, organic search engine optimization. So people are searching for daycare near me, your website, your Google business profile listing, and the maps are coming up on page 1. It's continuing to post lots of really great content. Most centers you look at, they don't post any blog content. We're trying to post at minimum 1 blog post every week for our centers, if not more. So it's more and more helpful content, which leads to search engine results improving. It leads to increased brand. It's just giving education to the community. Paid traffic, so Facebook ads, Google ads, TikTok ads. At the time of recording, TikTok ads may or may not be a thing in the next couple of days if TikTok gets completely shut down. But the final one that I wanted to share with you is not for the small centers. I mean, we focus on centers that are ideally already at 7 figures, they want to get to 8. But what I'm seeing for this year is a great opportunity to start to buy media in some of the bigger platforms. Most people don't realize that you can, as of today, you can buy ads on platforms like Hulu. You can be buying ads on Spotify. You can be buying traffic on places that people didn't necessarily realize, and all of a sudden people are thinking that, well, your center was in this particular movie or something crazy like that. Like, there's a lot of stealth things that can be done, and that ties into the whole brand aspect. So being able to start to look at where is the attention flowing. The attention is on cell phones. That's where people are at, and they're obsessively watching Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, Peacock, HBO Max, like all of these streaming platforms. As you're opening up more and more locations in your area, I want to get your brand, your name front and center in some of those other places, because I promise you other centers are not doing that. And the budgets aren't anything like minuscule, but they're also not anything that you're like, well, Michael, I don't have $100,000 to throw at Hulu. I mean, you can throw a few $1,000s at some of these platforms and start to test and make an impact and just get yourself out there. This, to me, is going to be the year of brand. From a marketing standpoint, the centers that build on brand, and it's not just reputation, it's brand. And that becomes needing to be the most well-known. There's this concept of being omnipresent, where they see you on Hulu, they see a YouTube ad, they see your Facebook page, your website, your Google Map listing, your $1 million tour. I still love billboards when they're used in the right capacity. I still love radio when it's used in the right capacity. And they're literally seeing you, hearing you, all these different places. That's omnipresent, and that's how you build brand, and that is how you are going to win and dominate in 2025. Next week, we're going to talk about the second component of MAST, which is the accounting and financials. What are some of the trends? What are some of the issues, challenges that we are seeing as we speak across all the centers that we're working with to make sure that you can dominate on that front, because you need strong financials in 2025. Get out there, take some action, get your centers moving. Michael Tazzer signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'll see you next week.